We are live. Welcome, everybody. I'm Brenda B. Bailey, and we are doing the Shatter Your Income Ceiling Theta Healing Power Hour. With we are having Miss Orla Quinn with me today. So I always forget to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and do it now. I am a Theta Healing master as well as an instructor, and I have been doing this for 14 years. So I've had two businesses, one a seven-figure sales company. So I combine all of that experience and have created the program Shatter Your Income Ceiling. So once a week, I get to interview really dynamic, cool, informative experts. And this week we have Miss Orla Quinn. So let me tell you a little bit about Orla. So Orla is an intimacy and relationship coach who upgrades power couples to their 5-star relationship. Her passion is to work with power couples all over the world whose marriage is suffering, or relationship, we'll say marriage or relationship, is suffering due to work pressures in the entertainment industry. So for artistic performers, the entertainment industry can be great for career and success, but can be a graveyard for marriage. And we've seen that over again, right? So being in the public eye and being away from home from long periods of time can put enormous strain on any marriage. So what is the solution to relationship survival in this unique and pressured environment? Orla's VIP 5-star. So she resets your marriage to honeymoon joy by programming your intimacy dial to 5-star quality. She does this by teaching you how to be expert lovers and long-term soul partners. So in 90 days, your marriage goes from functional to sensational, from mundane to ecstatic, and from shallow to exploring new sacred depths of connection. You get to reignite your sexual spark and dive into sacred heart connection that brings your relationship into a state on oneness. So in a nutshell, her program turns relationship survival into relationship thrival and takes you from where you are to 5-star. So welcome, Orla.
Thank you, Brenda. Joy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. So tell everybody where you're from, because that wasn't mentioned, and I know people will love that.
Yeah, okay. So I am from Ireland. I'm based in Ireland. I'm Irish. And for those of your listeners, watchers that know Ireland, I live in County Clare, which is in the southwest of the country. So yeah. So I'm a proud Irish woman.
Yay! We love to
Yay!
hear that. Yes. So, and I don't think I've ever met anybody that's from Ireland or that is Irish from Ireland that isn't proud, right? So
yeah, it comes with the comes with the
territory.
nationality. Yeah.
I was even married to somebody from Irish descent, and I just feel like it all goes hand in hand. So, Orla, we're going to go ahead and just like jump in. I want to ask you about the 5-star relationship. So, what is a 5-star relationship? When you're telling us about that, what does that mean?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me address the picture behind me. It's an interesting one. I'm actually in my friend's house, and it just so happens she has this picture, and I thought it was just it was very apt that I positioned myself here.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, for me, primary relationships need intimacy to survive. And I would say, unfortunately, there's a lot of relationships out there that are surviving or just comfortable, right? Being partnerships are kind of, they can be quite happy, they can be quite functional, but that can only last for a certain amount of time. What I'm trying to say is that ultimately, relationships without intimacy, relationships will struggle to survive. And what happens is that, unfortunately, couples don't know how to reignite kind of that honeymoon joy that they first feel when they meet each other. There's all of that butterfly falling in love feeling, and that you know, and that level of chemistry can, you know, that's what attracts a couple together, but that can only go for so long. And then it kind of, the intimacy can go, right? And that's what puts the strain on a relationship then, that ultimately, you know, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, where there's no touch, there's no sense of intimacy, that can kill a relationship. So what I do is, this is why I'm so passionate about my work, is because I see this problem being very easily solved, right? And it goes back to basic sex education that none of us were taught, basic relationship education that none of us were taught. And yeah, and it starts with communication. Like, it starts with getting comfortable talking about sex. And so, yeah, this is what I really want to focus on today, Brendan, in this talk, is really the importance of being comfortable talking about intimacy, because that's where it starts, addressing your, you know, being able to address your needs.
So we're talking about the importance in communication. Is there a format to that, or is there a flow to it in order to do that? How does, you know, we know that it's important. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of I would say it's almost necessary that you do some research around this, because it's an area that naturally we're not comfortable talking about. Like, you know, it's not just here in Ireland where people feel a little bit intimidated by by the whole area, you know, sexuality in general. And I won't go into that because Ireland's quite specific, but I think it's universal, right? There's so much shame around sexuality. So as a human body, as a human collective, there tends to be a lot of embarrassment around this, a lot of shame around it, a lot of just intimidation, and you know, and where we need to get, how we move from that to getting comfortable is talking and communicating. And so it starts with consent, right? That's the big important word, is consent. And that means there's a whole kind of world of consent around how to ask for what, you know, how to, first of all, how to say no, right? So setting your boundary on what you're not comfortable with, and then putting boundaries in place so that you are safe when it comes to intimacy. And that's where so many people fall down, and that's where sex becomes unsafe, is because they're not empowered in their no. They're not empowered in speaking their no. And sometimes and that goes deeper to knowing their no as well. So there is a link here between knowing your body boundary, as well as speaking it, right? So there's a big embodiment process to this. If you don't know your body, if you're not comfortable in your body, or if there isn't a kind of a strong sense of self-care and a feeling of how my body, like really adhering to your body needs, then boundaries are hard to establish, right? So we do need to start with knowing ourselves. Like, and that's where I would really start with in my coaching work. I always start with the individual. I always start with, well, where are you at with your body? Where are you at with your sexual needs? Where are you at with your boundaries? Like, where are you at with your sexuality, right? So ultimately, you have to feel safe. You ultimately have to feel safe. Otherwise, sex will not be enjoyable. Sex will not be pleasurable. So this is, this is a huge area that is necessary to really get comfortable with talking about, so that you do become safe to explore intimacy in a deep way. And that's where I want, that's where I'm really passionate about people getting confident here and getting body aware here, because I want them to explore the joy of sex. I want them to explore the joy of intimacy and the infinite possibility of growth and spiritual growth, as well as satisfying desires that can come from this process. So, so getting this foundational step right is, is fundamental, is absolutely fundamental. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people still are.
Well, I find, like as you're talking, I'm thinking about it, because it's like, one, yes, you can Google it, you can buy a book. But this is the thing. This is one of those areas that it's nice to have somebody who's an expert, because again, we know what we can do within the parameters of what we know, right? So we know what we know and we don't know what we don't know. And then if this is just a whole new area, which it is for so many people, for so many different reasons. And also too, when you're, and again, and I think that it falls with everybody, but when you're looking at a heterosexual couple,
Mm-hmm.
women think differently than men do. They communicate differently than men do. And what Orla is talking about, in addition, what she's, saying as well, is that if you don't know what it is that you want, if you don't have clarity and intention about what it is that you want, if you don't know that, especially as a woman talking to a man's not going to know it either. I mean, I'm sorry, like they need your help, right? Like it's like, and so one, yes, it's being in, initially like with the communication, being with somebody who you feel safe to express yourself with, but then you got to know what you want to express. Like, in fact, you kind of need to know that before that, right? So, I mean, would you agree with that, Orla?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
for women, we do this deal where we talk about what we don't want. And then we expect a man, and again, I'm talking about heterosexual, we expect a man to figure out what it is that we do want. And that's not fair, because they're kind of like going, and I mean, and this is just like, because this is the thing, right? How we do anything is how we do everything. So if you can get it here, like if you can get it in the bedroom, you can get it everywhere. Right. And I'm not saying that you have to start there first, but the deal is that if your communication can be here, it's because it's probably one of the most difficult areas for communication. Would you agree with that, Orla?
I start with that. In fact, I start with that because I believe that if you can master communication in this area, you can master it in all relationships, and that includes your working relationships, your family relationships, or your platonic relationships. Every single relationship in your life becomes a lot easier when you master communication in this territory.
And then also too, and I'm sure this is part of a component with you, is that when you look at the healing around that, it just is, like a puddle in a pond, and it just vibrates out to everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're doing something so intimate, so usually what's so secretive for most people, and then you expand that and you create an environment and work with somebody who it's safe to do that with, then you just create and attract safety in all areas of your life, which again contributes to the communication. So,
Mm-hmm.
this would be worthwhile to start, anywhere, if you're wanting to work on any of your relationships or any of the other areas of your life. So, Orla, what kind of touch leads to great intimacy?
I just want to come back to your point.
Okay.
Before I answer that question, I want to come back to your point around knowing what you want as well and being able to communicate to that. Because it's important to know your no, but then it's important to know your yes, and it's important to speak your yes and go for your ultimate yes. Like, not be afraid to speak your your desire. And that's where a lot of embarrassment, shame can be around, is actually naming what we want, right? So so there's, yeah, so this is another aspect of this communication, is that we really need to be comfortable with our yes in speaking, our, you know, and being confident in our yes, as well as being confident in our no. And that means body confident as well as voice confident.
You know,
Okay.
and I feel like that for people, I think, you know, people are like, oh, well, you know, I could be wrong, but having worked with a lot of clients as well, not you know, on this, but not right. It's also interrelated. Is that most people are comfortable and knowing what their no is, and it's more difficult for them to discover what their yes is, and that's, you know, just both are so important, right? So
Both are important, and actually the yes can come a lot clearer when the no is established. So that's
human
why,
nature.
yeah, it's human nature. And also, you know, we need to feel safe before we can start to explore. And this is why it's so important to get comfortable and get familiar with your no and what you want to. And like I'll go into that a little bit more, just around, like, in a relationship, for example, I work with couples who have been in relationship quite a long time, and so they've developed a partnership where um where there's kind of, there's the unspoken, and habits have developed, so based on experience. So there's never been words to interrupt that pattern. And that can be really difficult then down the line, after so many years, when habits are established, to interrupt the behavior. But that's where the no has to come in, and that's where the being comfortable with, actually, I, you know, I'm not comfortable how we've done this for so long. Like, I want to explore, you know, I have this desire that I want to explore. So that can be really difficult to address when habits are established. And that's where I really feel like that's where you have to do the work to interrupt um these patterns, so that you get to reset the intimacy dial, and ultimately that interruption delivers amazing results. Yeah,
Because
rather than
it's
just
that, you're right, it's that
going
definition of
with
insanity, right? It's like, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. And if you're not happy with the result, then you have to interrupt, disrupt, whatever you want to say. You have to do that, and it's so important. And you know, the thing is that, you know, again, I want to remind people, you know, comment below if you have any questions. Please share this. Tag somebody that you feel like, you know, if we're looking at intimacy or communication with intimacy, please tag them, right? So that they can also, because anything that we say, any of the healing work that we do, whether you're watching it live or you're watching it in the replay, is helpful. It will work. So, and this is some good information here. So are we ready to go on to the next question?
Yep, yeah, you asked about touch.
Yes.
Remind me.
What kind of touch leads to greater intimacy?
Okay, yeah. So there's a whole movement called the slow sex movement that Denise Richardson is a key player, key leader, a visionary in. And I believe this is something that relationships really need to start exploring, this kind of intimacy, especially in today's age, where there's so much of the other. There's so much pornography. There's when it comes to intimacy, people are very narrow-minded. They you know, they usually just go to kind of penetrative sex when they think of to intimacy. And I want to open their mind and make them realize that actually there's a whole other way. There's a whole other way that that is much more conscious, much more sensual, and brings you to an ecstatic state of bliss. And that takes a different kind of touch. And that's the kind of touch that I teach my clients.
Because again, I think it's that thing that there's only so much you can learn from a video or a book, guys. And what I was just what I was thinking when you were talking, Orla, is that like we just know about intimacy and love from what we see on TV and movies.
Yeah.
Or porn. I mean, I'm just saying, right? Like, let's just,
Yeah.
right? And people are just like, okay, and so it's some of that is that's all that's available, right? So when you can, work with an individual who can show you what needs to happen and allow some healing to happen around some of the things that we weren't even aware of, then that really opens the doors.
Yes.
Again.
And Brenda, I'm so glad you brought that up, in the movies and how sex is portrayed and how we see like what we know about sex. I mean, we've had the poorest education when it comes to this, right? Because we see it in the movies, or we get told a very a very basic, the majority of us get a very basic education on this at home around the birds and the bees. We just have to
we do it all. Yeah.
We pick it up as we go, right? And to me, that's why we have been misinformed, because the kind of intimacy that I am passionate about, which I'm passionate about sharing, is does not look like the kind of intimacy that you see in the movies. It's not the kind of intimacy you see on pornography sites or magazines, whatever. This is a slow. This takes time, and this is something that when I say to my clients that how it's done, they kind of, there's a resistance there because they're so used to intimacy being quick, and the kind of intimacy that I believe it sustains relationship takes time. So this is a big kind of I would say this is a contentious point. This can bring up some contention because people don't have time, right? Couples live very busy lifestyles. They don't set themselves time to explore intimacy. Unless it's it's a quick it's a you go out on a date and then sort of quick intimacy, and after that, the type of intimacy I'm talking about, the type of touch that I believe is necessary, is where you take a full afternoon to yourselves, a full day, even better, to your intimacy, to this touch. So it's a totally different framework to what is being shown anywhere publicly.
Yeah, I mean that something came up and then it just like immediately left, and I was like, that's interesting that it came up and then immediately left as you were talking about. But I just feel like that, again, it's another area that we are having to reframe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also because of the education that people are getting and the knowledge that they have, people just want more. We want a better quality of life in so many different ways, and I feel like that communication is a new thing. It's a new concept when it comes to intimacy and relationships, which sounds so crazy, right? Like, really? But I think it's a really new concept.
Yeah. Well, all of these areas are new concepts, right? Like consent, bringing consent into your partnership, bringing sensuality into your partnership. These can be these can be new concepts for people, right? So it's so there's a lot to understand about it, and then there's a lot to practice. It's like you get to understand it at a cognitive level, and then you get to practice it to embody it, and that's a whole other level. But
well, and You know, I
It's
think that
possible. It's all possible.
I think also too, what I was thinking of, Orla, was forgiveness,
Hmm.
you know, is a big piece in being able to move forward in this. You know, forgiving ourselves for not communicating in the past, and forgiving our partners for not reading our minds, and forgiving, you know, forgiving our parents for not educating us or giving, you know, what, you know, or the nuns or teachers or, you know, instructors or
Mm.
mass consciousness, you know, uh, movie industry. I mean, there's a lot of forgiveness around that, you know, and we'll go. Just remember that list because we'll do it here in a bit. But it's not you, Orla. I'm telling everybody out there because you know that's the thing. It's like if you want to be able to move forward and do it differently, we have to forgive our piece in it and whoever else to clean the slate and then be able to move forward.
Yeah,
Because if
beautiful.
not, I'm sure that you find that, Orla, that communication cannot be built when there's a lot of resentment and
Yes.
regret.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. I do also believe that there's a stage to go through before forgiveness can be sought. I do deal with a lot of sexual trauma, people who have relationship trauma, sexual trauma, and it's, you know, this work, because it's base chakra, it's the emotional underworld, it's very deep and it's very dark for people. And so, you know, for some people, they've repressed it for a lifetime. So to bring up some of these issues can be very, very difficult.
Well,
And what happens when these issues are brought up, the first emotion very often is anger. Um, and and it's, I always say it's really important to address that anger before you can move into a place of forgiveness. Because if you repress the anger, the forgiveness can never really be real, can never be really felt, can never really be embodied. Um, because and when we go to the body, when you look at the body, the emotional world really exists in the lower chakras, in the base chakras, so in the gut, in the stomach, in the digestive system. And where does forgiveness lie? In the heart. So if we don't address some of these emotional, these dark, deep kind of emotional pains in the body, we can't actually open the heart to forgiveness or joy. So I would, yeah, I also recognize there's a process. There's a process to that forgiveness, Brenda, which I'm sure you would agree with, that a process of just addressing the anger, addressing the shame, addressing the guilt. These are, you know, these are huge shadows that people can feel at multiple levels. And you know, there's a great deal of weight put on these. It can be family shame, it can be personal shame, family shame, cultural shame, church. You know, there's so many layers, ancestral, right? So there can be a lot of layers to these emotions. And so it's about giving yourself the space, giving yourself, and this is where it is about coming back to the self and doing work on yourself, not putting responsibility or not blaming anyone else for these, but really allowing these emotions to be felt, to be processed, so that you can reach that place of forgiveness.
absolutely. Right now, we're doing in my membership program, we're working on chakras and doing theta healing work around that. And of course, you know, with the base chakra, the foundation of what you are, it's the sexual chakra, right? And so it I don't. know if people can wrap, a lot of times people, I don't believe, can wrap their head around the trauma of any type of sexual trauma that anybody has ever experienced. Nobody really talks about it. And some people even like block it out. So, but it's affecting every area of their lives because it's your foundation. And the beautiful thing about Theta Healing is that it is phenomenal with forgiveness and trauma, which again, you still have to do your emotional work. It just makes it easier so that you can have that, because it's not as big once you've done the Theta Healing work around it. It's more manageable. It's not as overwhelming. So that's what I really, when I think, because a lot of people I know, again, most people will pray, they'll go to church, they'll look at forgiveness, but to do it through Theta Healing takes it to a completely different level, which really allows to move on to Orla's program and what she offers, because then you're, and she helps you with that as well, right? To be able to move into the intimacy and move into the intimacy with self as well as in relationships, because it always starts with us.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
just does. So Orla, how does a relationship foster spiritual oneness?
So this is it brings me back to my 5-star relationship brand. And for me, the 5-star is the 5 dimensionality. I believe sexuality is a gateway to our spirituality. I believe conscious relationships. We are living in the time of conscious relationships, and that conscious relationship is the portal to our spirituality and to the gateway of the cosmic heart. So I I believe relationships are necessary for us to co-evolve in this time of the golden age or the age of Aquarius or whatever you want to call it. So I I believe that the relationships are the way that we get there. Um, for a long time, you know, people went and did their own spiritual journey, went into a state of solitude, maybe join, a monk, being a monk or being a nun or whatever, going on that very disciplined spiritual journey that involves a lot of solitude. And I do believe there was a time for that, but now I think we're in a different time, and it's calling for co-creation. And there's a lot of teachers that I have followed on this very subject. The late Barbara Marx Hubbard being one, Patricia Alber, a teacher of mine, as well, on mutual awakening and how these conscious relationships can help us mutually awaken. So for me, this is the way forward when it comes to, like I say, our gateway to heaven, like our gateway to the conscious heart, the cosmic heart.
I think with anything, and I feel like that possibly, like Orla and I probably see this in a different way than maybe like the average person out there, trying to say that like nicely, is because when you're an entrepreneur, you really do have to look at everything. And it takes work if you want it to be different. So it's the same thing with relationships. I think that people are just like, oh, like, I mean, you're just going to fall off the cabbage truck and all of a sudden, be like profound at relationships and intimacy and, wants and needs and all of that. It's like, unfortunately, we didn't get taught this. So it's something that does take effort. And I'm sure that Orla is going to let us know, or what is it? What would the right word be? Uh, Confirm, validate that it will get easier as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
If we're
Yeah.
willing to put the effort in to begin with.
Yes.
as with anything,
Yes.
right? But
Yes.
I,
Yes.
I think it's important for that to be said, because I think somebody's saying a whole day, like, but it's like, well, again, with anything that we do, you've got to disrupt, interrupt, however you want to say it, and really get some foundation together. It takes a little time to be able to move forward in a bigger, better, different, richer, juicier
Mhm.
way.
Yeah, it absolutely, repatterning takes time. And yeah, it, like, once you get into this new pattern, it will just become, it will become less of an effort, for sure. It's with any change, it takes effort. So it's why I have my program, so that you don't, couples don't have to do this alone. They have a guide, they have someone who's holding space for them, showing them the way, giving them the tools, and being there for them, patiently instructing them as they go through this. Because it's not easy, and it's a case of, if you don't know, it's the blind leading the blind, right? It's very much a case where you you need help for going through a shift and a change like this, because when it comes to intimacy, it's a fundamental shift. It's it impacts all of our relationships, and relationships affect everything in our life. So what I'm saying
Communication
is,
and relation, right? Absolutely.
so when you alter this, when you shift your the program around intimacy and this kind of intimate relationship, you know, reiterating, that will have ripple effects outside and will change your life, basically, will have an impact on every aspect of your life. So yeah, so the time, time, of course, it will take time to interrupt these patterns. And yes, it will be hard, right? There'll be resistance to that, but ultimately it will become easier, it will become more effortless, it will become more pleasurable, you will look forward to it, it will be something you will damn well put in your calendar. You will do everything to adhere to that day or that half day in the calendar. So that would be my kind of promise, that that's where you will get to.
Yeah, I
um
think that since people can't, you can't imagine what you're missing, but people can, right? But they can't, and they have no idea what will happen on the other side. That to be able to put that type of, you know, um, time aside, or make the time, or carve out the time, however you want to say it, that absolutely. And again, we're talking about a basic foundational, and it will pay off in so many ways. It'll be like a domino effect. So
mm,
definitely can see where it would, there'll be less coaches that you'll have to hire in the future. I'm just saying, because of having dealt with the base, the foundation. So, Orla, is there anything else before we do a little theta work, and then we want to hear about how to get a hold of you, and um, anything else that you want us to know? Is there anything else around your subject that you would like to, that
mm.
hasn't been said yet?
Well, yeah, I think what you addressed there is important around, well, people don't know what they're missing, so that's why they kind of stay sort of limited in their in their sexual exploration, let's say, or their intimate exploration. So what I would say to that is, yeah, start to dream big, because the infinite is possible. And we were born with this purity of heart, and this purity of that pleasure is pure. It's just been all the conditioning that has made pleasure impure. So our journey to this on this process is making pleasure as pure and as beautiful as it was meant to be, right? And from that place, we get to soar. We get to soar to the heights of how big pleasure wants to be. And there's no limit to pleasure. There's absolutely no limit to pleasure. So when you're truly at that place of discovering pleasure, you will see you will see how small we're playing. Let's just say you will see how much we're kind of just taking up this much space when it comes to the actual potential of pleasure that we get to enjoy.
Nice. Because I feel like that people also don't understand it permeates, like not having it right, not getting it, not and not like literally not getting it, but and not getting the whole concept, the whole intimacy, the whole spirituality, that it just holds us back in so many different ways. So absolutely. So we're going to do a little work, right? Because we can, even though you have to put the time and effort into it, working and doing some theta healing work and working with a 5-star relationship expert like Orla Quinn can speed it up and make it easier for the time and effort that you do need to put in. Again, I actually just heard this morning, and I absolutely agree with it. Nobody likes to waste time. Nobody likes to waste their time or money. So this is definitely an area that is worth the investment, for sure. So whenever, what I tell people is people can tell me how they think and how they feel. What we create in our lives is what we believe, and we hold that on a cellular level. So it goes beyond our head, right? Because especially like you can't do a lot of thinking about intimacy and communication and sex, right? It's not about thinking. So if we're stuck in our heads, it's going to limit. So that's the beautiful thing about theta healing is we bypass that and go down to the cellular level. So then again, our emotions and our minds follow. And for most people, they can tell me how they think and how they feel, but they really don't know what their beliefs are. But I often tell people, if you want to know what it is that you believe, look at your world. Look at what you've created. And so to do it a little bit quicker, easier, less painful, theta healing is an amazing technique. So whenever I work with a new client or student, I always make sure that they have 3 beliefs in place. And that's I want an instant healing, I deserve an instant healing, and an instant healing is possible. So with any of the work that gets done, whether you're watching it live or watching a replay, you just want to say yes out loud and you'll get it. So if you haven't ever had those done for you, you just need to say yes out loud. Okay, so if you'd like that. So I often say that we need to get those universal definitions, the ones that allow us to have that objectivity and neutrality. That's where growth comes from. It also allows us to be able to figure out what our no's are and what our yeses are, right? So we want to get some of those definitions around yes and no, around communication, intimacy, and investment in self. So we want to get those definitions so that we have that objective neutral understanding, but then we also want to shift what prevents us from communicating, what prevents us from intimacy, what prevents us from investing in ourselves and in our relationships. So I also want to get the definition of relationship as well, because relationship has to do with self, it has to do with others, it has to do with everything. So if you would like those, just say yes out loud. And if you want them, Orla, you can say yes out loud too if you'd like. And when I look at prevention, like what prevents us from creating that, what prevents us from attracting that, you know, however you want to look at it, it's usually some type of trauma. So that's what we've really looked at there, is the trauma that is around that. And so we also want to shift what causes us to have shame around sex. So if you would like that, just say yes out loud. And any obligations that we have around that, because that's something that typically we've inherited, or it's a mass consciousness type thing, or it's a cultural thing. So again, if you'd like that, just say yes out loud. And then last, let's shift what causes us to prevent, like what prevents us from putting the time and effort into ourselves and our relationships. So if you would like that, just say yes out loud. And theta healing is such an easy technique to learn. And the cool thing is that for the first time in 20 years, they're allowing us to teach the basic classes. There's 3 prerequisite classes for any of the upper level ones virtually. So in the comments below, I'll have like a link if you want to know about future classes. If you I also, if you want to chat with me, if something that I've said, right, it's something like, well, how would theta healing work with this? You know, I'll have a link below. And then also too, I offer an abundance, like a free abundance meditation, but it's about your intention, just like what Orla was talking about. It's about our intention. It's about our awareness. So it works with anything. I make it about abundance because I love to help people make more money. So, but if that's not what what your, and again, you can always like do it 1 month for this and the next month for that. So if you want to look at intimacy or you want to look at relationships, you can make that your intention when doing the meditation, and it's 1 minute. So I'll have all the links below. But what I want is I want to come back to Orla so we can end this with Orla telling us how we can find out about her and anything else that she'd like for us to know as we're coming to the end here of our co-life.
Yes, okay. Well, Brenda, thank you for that. Theta healing. I'm practiced in the technique myself, so yeah, I love going back to it. Yeah, I'd like to tell our viewers about a 9-month online program, that is exploring sexual shadow work and integration. So this is from the Shakti Shiva Academy that I am affiliate of, or heading in that direction. And this course is starting in July, so it's starting I think the 16th of this month. So it's really kind of quite imminent, and it's for anyone who wants to take a deep dive into their sexuality for sexual liberation, because the sexuality, like what I talked about before, It's in the base chakras, so there's a lot of unconscious patterns to this work, and very often we hide our shame. There's the repressed shame, there's the repressed emotions, there's the repressed fantasies. There's a lot that we keep hidden, and there's a lot that's in the unconscious. So this course is very much about exploring the unconscious, so really opening the door to the unconscious. And so it's navigating kind of that murky terrain, right, of sexual shadow. And and we all hold it. We all hold sexual shadow. So it's really so it's a beautiful course that has 9 modules that explores all kind of these shadows and helps you integrate these shadows so that you can come into personal liberation, personal sexual liberation, because the more we take from the unconscious into the conscious, the more we can liberate ourselves so that we can find those relationships that really serve us, so that we don't have to work on these unconscious sexual shadows through in our relationships. And that's what very often ends relationships, is because of all the shadow work that comes through. So it is important to take time out sometimes and really just face our shadows, so that, and do that personal work, so that we can come into a loving relationship where we're not holding on to this shadow, sexual shadow. So this is a beautiful course that's coming up, and it's for anyone, like I said, who's ready to really explore this area. If they feel like there is trauma there, if they feel that there is a lot of repression, this is a course for you. I will send you the link. I will send Brenda the link to this. Brenda, I think I already did share it with you. So, but if it's not, I'll give it to you. And I suppose part of the kind of the gift that I can give is a 10% discount, just because I'm affiliate of the program. So if you use my bonus code Orla, when you're purchasing the program, you get a 10% discount. So I'm delighted to share that with you. For any of you viewers who are ready to go on a sexual exploration journey.
Thank you, Orla. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Please tag, share it with people, let people know. This was fun. This was good. This was a little bit of a taboo subject that we got to talk about on Facebook Live.
Exactly. We got to talk about sex, Brenda. Yeah.
I know, right? We need to have that song in the background, right? I
Yeah.
can't even think of who sang it, but yes, because it's
Yeah.
been a while. So, and I'm not good with song names or artists. So, anyway, so thank you, Orla, Quinn. I appreciate. And next week we are going to be same time, same place with Deborah Valentina, and we will be talking about freedom and joy through chaos. So overcoming chaos and arriving at freedom and joy. So thank you everybody who's joining us. Thank you everybody who is sharing it. And thank you everybody who's watching the replay. We appreciate it. All right, everybody.
Bye.